12 backyard weeds stronger than antibiotics. You've been pulling them up. Right now, somewhere in your yard, growing through a crack in your fence, creeping along your garden edge, or hiding in plain sight between your tomatoes and your roses. There is a plant that traditional healers used for over 1,000 years to stop infections that would have otherwise killed people. And there is a very good chance you pulled one up last weekend and tossed it straight into the trash. That is not an exaggeration. That is not clickbait. That is the actual situation most home gardeners are in, and nobody is talking about it. Welcome back to Gardening Secrets Hub, the channel where we give you real, practical, affordable solutions that grow right outside your door. And today, we're going into territory that is going to make some of you uncomfortable and make others of you genuinely angry that you were never taught this. We are talking about 12 common backyard weeds that have 1,000 years of documented human use behind them, plants that people reached for before the pharmacy ever existed. Not prescriptions. Not medical advice. Just the honest record of what worked, what the science now says about why it worked, and why most gardeners are actively destroying these plants every single season without knowing what they are throwing away. Now, before we go any further, I need you to hear me clearly on something. Everything you are about to hear is historical, educational, and informational. This is not medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider before using any plant medicinally. What we are doing here is exploring a history that belongs to all of us and that most of us were never taught. Alright, let us get into it. Number 1. Self-heal. The infection stopper hiding in your lawn. And I want you to pay close attention to that name, because it is not poetry. It is a job description. Prunella vulgaris has been documented across Asia, Europe, and North America in ethnobotanical literature as a frontline treatment for wounds and oral infections, long before a single pharmaceutical alternative existed on this planet. And the scientific reason why it worked has only become clearer with time. The primary active compounds in self-heal are rosmarinic acid, betulinic acid, and complex polysaccharides. Now here is what makes that combination genuinely remarkable. It does something that most single-molecule antibiotics simply cannot do. It prevents pathogens from replicating and from binding to healthy host cells at the same time. That dual action means the infection loses its ability to spread while the body's own repair process catches up from behind. Research has specifically flagged self-healing's effectiveness against multi-drug resistant bacterial strains. The exact strains that conventional antibiotics are increasingly failing to control. Let that sink in for a moment. Now, identification. Look for a square stem. That square stem is your first clue. Opposite lanceolate leaves. And compact violet-purple flower spikes emerging from a terminal cluster. It grows in lawns, disturbed soil, garden edges, and shaded woodland borders without any help from you whatsoever. Here's the thing most people get completely wrong about this plant. The preparation method is not optional. It determines whether this plant actually works. For topical use on skin lesions, slow-healing wounds, or surface infections, you want a concentrated aqueous decoction of the aerial parts used as a direct wash. For oral infections, pharyngeal inflammation, or throat conditions, that same preparation works beautifully as a gargle. And do not apply it to deep or non-sterile puncture wounds. This plant grows in USDA zones 4 through 9. It is one of the most widely distributed medicinal herbs in the entire temperate northern hemisphere, which means the majority of people watching this video right now already have it growing somewhere in their yard. The downside? It looks like a completely unremarkable lawn weed. Most people mow straight over it before it ever gets the chance to flower. And that is the tragedy. If this is already changing the way you see your outdoor space, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. Because everything we cover on Gardening Secrets Hub is built around finding value in what most people overlook. And we are just getting started. Number 2. Broadleaf plantain. The universal field dressing. This plant is not subtle about where it lives. Compacted urban soils. Sidewalk fissures. Gravel paths. Parking lot edges. It goes straight for the most disturbed, abused ground available and thrives there. And that is actually your first clue that something unusual is happening at the chemistry level. The therapeutic record for this plant is extraordinary in one very specific way. Ethnobotanical documentation from Iran, rural India, continental Europe, and the Appalachian Highlands all independently converge on the exact same application. This plant, used fresh as a first response wound covering for lacerations, insect stings, and localized skin infections. For separate regions. For separate traditions. No communication between them. Same conclusion. That kind of cross-cultural consensus, developed independently across continents, is as close to natural validation as traditional plant medicine gets. The active compounds are iridoid glycosides, specifically aucubin and catapol, along with mucilage. The iridoid glycosides reduce local tissue inflammation and accelerate cellular repair. The mucilage forms a physical barrier over damaged tissue that limits bacterial exposure while healing begins underneath. Together they explain why this plant served as a field dressing for centuries. Identification. The leaf is the key here. Oval with distinctly ribbed parallel veins running the full length of the blade, arranged in a low basal rosette close to the ground. A central flowering spike rises from the center of the rosette. Confirm both features before you harvest anything, and always wash the leaf before any topical application. USDA Zones 3 through 9. Resistant to foot traffic, soil compaction, and repeated mowing. Which is exactly why it survives in places where nothing else can. Here is the controversial part that I want you to think about and leave in the comments below. This plant is so common, so widely distributed, and so thoroughly ignored that it gets destroyed every single day by people who desperately need exactly what it offers. Is that a failure of education? Or is it something else? Tell me what you think down below. Number 3. Usnea lichen. Nature's slow-grown antibacterial. This one requires a completely different kind of attention because it does not grow from soil at all. Usnea is a slow-growing fruticose lichen that colonizes the bark of mature hardwood trees, most commonly oak, in humid temperate forest environments. Rural herbalists across multiple traditions have called it simply nature's antibacterial, and the primary compound responsible for that reputation has been studied extensively. Usnic acid is a potent dibenzofuran derivative that disrupts the cell membranes of gram-positive bacteria. The category that includes Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, and several strains now showing resistance to first-line antibiotics. The mechanism is membrane-level disruption, which is fundamentally different from the protein synthesis inhibition used by most conventional antibiotics. And that difference in pathway is precisely what makes it relevant in any serious discussion of antibiotic resistance. Clinical applications historically focus on respiratory conditions. Acute bronchitis, persistent upper respiratory infections, deep chest pathologies that do not clear quickly. Now here is where most guides stop. And here is where we do not. Field identification for this plant is non-negotiable before you harvest anything. Look for a single point attachment to the tree bark. Usnea attaches at one base point only. Then pull the main stem gently apart and look for a white, highly elastic inner cord running through the center. That white elastic cord is your confirmation. Lookalikes that lack this cord are either inactive or potentially harmful. Do not skip this step. Found in temperate hardwood forest zones across North America and Europe. Most reliably present in areas with clean air because Usnea is extremely sensitive to atmospheric pollution and disappears entirely from heavily industrialized regions. The downside? It is slow-growing and ecologically sensitive. Harvest conservatively. Only from fallen branches or dead wood. Never from a living tree. And this is strictly contraindicated in individuals with pre-existing liver dysfunction. No exceptions. Number 4. Common sage. The natural penicillin on your spice rack. The reputation of this plant is backed by a serious phytochemical profile. Historically used across Mediterranean, Arabic, and European traditional medicine to treat respiratory inflammation, acute tonsillitis, and oral cavity infections, sage earned the label of natural penicillin before modern analysis could explain the mechanism. Now it can. The active compounds are thujone, cineol, and rosmarinic acid. Cineol opens airways and reduces respiratory inflammation. Rosmarinic acid suppresses bacterial replication. Thujone provides the antimicrobial edge. Together, they create a preparation that addresses infection, inflammation, and microbial spread through multiple simultaneous pathways. For acute pharyngitis and oral infections specifically, an aqueous infusion is the standard preparation. 250 milliliters of water. 1 teaspoon of dried herb. Boiled without a lid to preserve the volatile compounds. Used as a gargle or rinse. Not swallowed in large quantities. Now here is the part that most people skip completely, and skipping it is genuinely dangerous. Thujone is also a neurotoxic monoterpene. In excessive quantities or over prolonged use, it can trigger acute neurological distress and seizures. The safe window is narrow. A maximum of 2 cups per day for no more than 5 consecutive days. This is not a plant you use casually or continuously. USDA zones 5 through 8. Gray-green, velvety leaves. Strong camphoraceous aroma that intensifies sharply the moment you crush a leaf. Strictly contraindicated in pregnancy, lactation, and epilepsy. The same compound that makes this plant medicinally powerful is the one that makes it dangerous outside those parameters. There is no workaround. Number 5. Lamb's quarters. The overlooked nutritional powerhouse. Before modern agriculture systematically removed it from cultivated land, this plant was a dietary staple across ancient European, Asian, and North American cultures. It was deliberately cultivated in some regions, naturally tolerated in others. Then herbicides arrived, and it became a target. The chemistry that made it valuable is still completely intact. Chenopodium album, known as lamb's quarters, fat hen, or goosefoot, contains saponins that act as immunomodulatory compounds, supporting and regulating immune response rather than simply suppressing symptoms. And the mineral profile is extraordinary. Magnesium concentration runs approximately 5 times that of spinach alongside significant calcium and iron content. 5 times. Think about that. A plant that most home gardeners spray without a second thought contains 5 times the magnesium of spinach. I am going to let you sit with that for a moment. When the immune system is depleted and nutrient reserves are low, conditions that make the body far more susceptible to infection in the first place, this plant addresses the underlying deficit directly. It is not just treating infection. It is restoring the body's capacity to fight it. Identification. Look for alternate goosefoot-shaped leaves with a distinctive powdery white mealy coating on the underside. That coating is not soil and it is not disease. It is the plant's natural surface feature and your primary identification marker. Before you use this, there is one thing you absolutely cannot skip. The leaves contain oxalates. Consuming them raw in large quantities creates real problems, particularly for individuals prone to calcium oxalate kidney stones. The solution is simple. Boil the young shoots and discard the first cooking water. Heat processing reduces oxalate content to safe levels and significantly improves digestibility. USDA zones 3 through 9. A warm season annual that germinates prolifically in disturbed garden soil, raised beds, and compost-rich ground. Quick pause here. If you are finding this genuinely useful and you have not subscribed yet, please do that right now. And drop a comment below telling me which plant on this list surprised you the most. I read every single comment personally, and the engagement helps this channel keep bringing you content like this. Now back to it. Number 6. Wild oregano. The broad-spectrum membrane disruptor. Here is something that might genuinely bother you. The oregano sitting in your spice rack right now and the wild oregano in your backyard are not the same plant in any meaningful medicinal sense. Origanum vulgar, growing in its natural state, on rocky hillsides, along disturbed roadsides, at sunny woodland margins, produces concentrations of carvacrol and thymol that commercially dried culinary oregano almost never matches. That distinction matters enormously the moment you move from flavor to function. Carvacrol and thymol are terpene phenols. Their mechanism is direct membrane disruption. They penetrate and destabilize the outer membranes of bacteria, fungi, and parasites, causing cellular leakage that the pathogen cannot recover from. And here is what makes that mechanism particularly significant. It demonstrates broad-spectrum reach. E. coli, Candida species, multiple parasitic organisms, all showing documented susceptibility to the same compound class. One compound class acting across 3 distinct pathogen categories simultaneously. Here is what most people get wrong about this one. Wild oregano in concentrated form, particularly as an essential oil, is potent enough to irritate mucous membranes when used undiluted. Always dilute essential oil preparations in a carrier oil before any internal or topical application. The fresh plant prepared as an infusion or applied topically at normal use levels does not carry this risk. USDA zones 4 through 9. A creeping perennial with rhizomatous roots, aromatic ovate leaves, and terminal clusters of purplish flowers. Here is the controversial point I want you to think about and debate in the comments. The wild version of a common kitchen herb is medicinally far superior to the commercially processed version most people pay money for. What does that tell us about how we source and process our food? Genuinely curious what you all think. Number 7. Stinging nettle. The plant that medicates on contact. The sting is the introduction. You brush against the stem or leaf. The hollow silica-tipped trichomes break on contact. Formic acid and histamine are delivered directly into the skin. Most people walk away and never go near this plant again. That response is completely understandable. And it is completely counterproductive. Because the exact same compounds responsible for the sting are also responsible for a well-documented anti-inflammatory mechanism used therapeutically for centuries across European, Asian, and Native American traditions. The formic acid that causes the sting, when prepared correctly, delivers genuine anti-inflammatory action. Chemistry in context changes everything. The active profile includes formic acid, histamine, and a dense mineral matrix particularly rich in iron, making it one of the most effective hematinic plants available in most temperate gardens. Used as a therapeutic preparation, nettle supports chronic inflammatory conditions, joint inflammation, arthritis, and systemic inflammatory states that require sustained long-term management rather than acute intervention. Here is what most people get completely wrong about this one. Heat neutralizes the irritant properties entirely. Boiling or blanching for as little as 60 seconds deactivates the stinging trichomes and transforms this plant into a safe, highly nutritious green and medicinal tea. Harvest with gloves. Process immediately with heat. The plant that stung you becomes one of the most nutritionally dense foods growing anywhere in your yard. USDA zones 3 through 10. Grows in moist, nitrogen-rich soil near disturbed ground, stream banks, and garden edges, particularly where compost or animal activity has enriched the soil. Gloves are non-negotiable during harvest. There is no workaround. Do not test that. Number 8. Mugwort. The skin healer with a serious phytochemical profile. Mugwort has one of the most specific applications on this entire list. Where most plants in this category work broadly across infection categories, mugwort targets a particular category of skin pathology with unusual precision: chronic pruritus and superficial fungal inflammation. Through a compound class that many conventional topical treatments cannot sustain over repeated application without side effects. The active fraction is volatile terpenes combined with sesquiterpene lactones. The terpenes deliver direct antipruritic action. They interrupt the itch inflammation cycle, driving conditions like eczema and contact dermatitis at the receptor level, not just at the surface. The sesquiterpene lactones add targeted antifungal coverage, disrupting fungal cell membrane integrity in superficial skin infections. Together, these two compound classes explain a historical application record spanning Asia, Europe, and North America for persistent dermatological conditions that conventional treatments managed but rarely resolved. Identification. The leaves are deeply lobed, cut almost to the midrib in a feathery pattern. And the underside of every single leaf is covered in silvery woolly hairs that give the plant its characteristic two-tone appearance. That silver underside is your primary identification marker. If you do not see silver on the underside, you do not have mugwort. The therapeutic application is external. A bath prepared by steeping the aerial parts in hot water, straining the liquid, and adding it to bath water. This is not a plant for internal consumption under any circumstances. The volatile compounds that make it effective topically carry a fundamentally different risk profile taken orally. strictly contraindicated during pregnancy. The sesquiterpene lactones in Artemisia species carry well-documented uterotonic properties. No exceptions on this one. Number 9. Garlic mustard. The invasive that earned its keep. Here is a genuinely interesting contradiction. In North America, garlic mustard is classified as an aggressive invasive species that outcompetes native woodland understory plants and disrupts forest ecology. Eradication campaigns run every spring across the eastern states. Conservation volunteers pull it by the garbage bag. What most of those volunteers do not know is that before it arrived on this continent, garlic mustard carried a documented history in European herbal medicine stretching back centuries. The active compounds, sinigrin and glucosinolates, display moderate antibacterial and antifungal properties. Glucosinolates are the same class of compounds responsible for the therapeutic properties of horseradish and wasabi. When plant tissue is crushed, enzymatic breakdown of sinigrin releases active compounds that inhibit bacterial and fungal growth. That is why the plant smells simultaneously of garlic and mustard the moment you bruise a leaf. The odor is the chemistry activating. In historical European practice, garlic mustard functioned primarily as a topical antiseptic wash for wounds and skin infections, and as a culinary ingredient that delivered mild antimicrobial benefit through everyday food preparation. Here is the one critical detail about this specific plant that makes it genuinely unique on this list. In North American woodland and forest edge environments, harvesting garlic mustard is an ecological service. Removing it before it sets seed directly benefits native plant communities. Pull the whole plant. Use what you need. Compost the rest. You are actively helping the ecosystem while gathering useful medicine. That is a genuinely rare situation. USDA Zones 3 through 8. A biennial that forms a ground-hugging rosette in its first year before sending up flowering stalks in its second. The downside? Moderate potency compared to others on this list. Excellent as a topical preparation. Not a primary treatment for serious infections. Number 10. Purslane. The topical fire extinguisher. This plant is almost aggressively useful. It grows in heat, in drought, in compacted soil, in the gaps between paving stones, in every raised bed you have ever tried to keep weed-free. It is succulent, thick-leaved, and utterly relentless. And the vast majority of home gardeners treat it as a pest. Purslane, Portulaca oleracea, has the highest recorded omega-3 fatty acid content of any land plant measured, specifically alpha-linolenic acid. The same fatty acid category is associated with reduced inflammatory response in human tissue. When applied topically to insect bites, mild burns, and inflammatory skin reactions, the mucilaginous sap creates immediate cooling contact and begins interrupting the inflammatory cascade at the application site. This is why traditional healers across the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and East Asia reached for it first when skin needed rapid calming. Identification is straightforward. Thick, succulent, reddish stems. Small, paddle-shaped, fleshy leaves. Tiny yellow flowers. Low prostrate growth habit that spreads outward from a central root. Once you learn it, you will see it everywhere. Because it is everywhere. For topical use, crush fresh leaves and stems and apply directly to the affected area. The sap does the work. For culinary and nutritional use, young shoots can be eaten raw in salads or cooked lightly as a green. The omega-3 content makes it genuinely worth including in your regular diet. USDA Zones 4 through 11. An annual that self-seeds prolifically in warm soil and returns every season without any help from you. The uncomfortable truth about purslane? It is nutritionally superior to most vegetables people deliberately plant in their gardens. And it grows for free. Absolutely everywhere. Drop a comment below if you have been pulling this one up. I genuinely want to know how many of you have been throwing away free omega-3s. Number 11. Cleavers. The lymphatic cleanser that sticks to everything. If you have ever walked through tall grass and arrived on the other side covered in tiny sticky green burrs that seem to cling to every fiber of your clothing simultaneously, you have already met cleavers. Galium aperine. And the same sticky quality that makes this plant so immediately annoying is directly related to its historical therapeutic application. The sticky exterior, produced by tiny hooked hairs called cilia, is rich in tannins and iridoid glycosides. And the traditional application of cleavers across European and North American herbal medicine is uniquely specific. It was used almost exclusively as a lymphatic tonic, a preparation supporting the movement and clearance of the lymphatic system, the network responsible for filtering waste, pathogens, and cellular debris from tissues throughout the body. The active compounds support lymphatic flow and reduce the tendency toward lymph node swelling associated with persistent infection. Used as a cold infusion, prepared by soaking the fresh aerial parts in cold water overnight rather than applying heat, which preserves the most active constituents. Drink this strained liquid. The cold preparation is more effective than a heated one for this particular plant. Most guides get this wrong. Identification. Long scrambling stems covered in tiny backward-pointing hooks. Whorls of 6 to 8 narrow leaves arranged like a star around each stem node. Tiny white four-petaled flowers. The whole plant sticks aggressively to clothing, animal fur, and skin. USDA zones 3 through 9. A cool season annual that germinates in late winter and early spring, dies back in summer heat, and is most potent when harvested young in early spring. The downside? It is genuinely unpleasant to handle in quantity. The sticky texture clings to everything. Gloves and patience are recommended during harvest. Number 12. Yarrow, the wound herb that soldiers carried into battle. We're ending this list with a plant that has one of the most extensively documented wound healing records in all of human history. And I mean that literally. The genus name, Achillea millefolium, is taken directly from the Greek hero Achilles, who according to legend was taught by the centaur Chiron to use this plant to treat the battlefield wounds of his soldiers. Whether you take that mythology literally or not, the fact that this plant was considered significant enough to name after one of antiquity's greatest warriors tells you something important about how it was regarded. The active compounds in yarrow are a comprehensive wound response toolkit. Achiltin promotes blood coagulation at wound sites. Camisoline and azulene are anti-inflammatory compounds that reduce tissue inflammation around the wound margin. Alkaloids and flavonoids provide antimicrobial coverage against wound site pathogens. No single compound is doing all the work. Every stage of the wound healing process has a corresponding compound addressing it. That layered response is why yarrow was one of the most widely carried medicinal plants in military history across multiple cultures and centuries. European Knights, Native American warriors, American Civil War field medics. All of them use some preparation of this plant for traumatic wounds. For topical application, crush fresh aerial parts and apply directly to lacerations and surface wounds as a poultice to slow bleeding and reduce infection risk. For internal use, as a tea for fever management and systemic anti-inflammatory support, use a standard aqueous infusion of the dried aerial parts. Identification. Finely dissected feathery leaves, almost lacy in appearance, that give the plant its species name millefolium, meaning 1,000 leaves. Flat-topped corym flower clusters, white or occasionally pale pink, rising on a central stem. Strong aromatic herbal scent when the leaves are crushed. USDA zones 3 through 9. A vigorous spreading perennial that naturalizes readily in lawns, meadow edges, and disturbed ground throughout the temperate northern hemisphere. The downside? Yarrow contains thujone, the same neurotoxic compound present in sage. Internal use should follow the same conservative approach. Maximum 2 cups per day. No more than 5 consecutive days. Strictly contraindicated in pregnancy. Alright, let us bring this home. You just went through 12 plants. 12 species that have been growing in gardens, along roadsides, in lawn cracks, and at woodland edges across most of the temperate world for thousands of years. 12 plants with documented therapeutic histories that span multiple continents and multiple independent cultural traditions. 12 plants that most modern gardeners treat as weeds to be eliminated. And here is the question I want to leave you with. The one I genuinely want you to debate in the comments section below. Were we taught to see these plants as weeds because they are actually useless? Or were we taught to see them as weeds because someone somewhere had a financial reason to make sure we reached for a bottle instead of the backyard? I am not telling you what to think. I am asking you to think. Leave your answer in the comments. I mean it. I want to hear from you. A few things to take with you before you go. None of this is medical advice. Consult a qualified healthcare provider before using any plant medicinally. Identification before harvesting. Always. The preparation method matters more than most people realize. And correct identification matters more than anything else on this list. When in doubt, do not harvest. The knowledge exists. It has always existed. It was never lost. It was just never passed on. And that is exactly what Gardening Secrets Hub is here to change. If this video gave you something useful, please subscribe right now if you have not already. And share this with one person in your life who gardens. Because this is exactly the kind of information that gets quietly buried, and the only way it keeps reaching people is if you help it travel. I will see you in the next.